I appreciate your concern. I really do. I love this game, and I love it to the death of me.
I watched the film, and I was like, I don't even remember this portion of the game.
That's it.
On September 29th of 2022, during the second quarter of a battle between two AFC teams, Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa was forcefully sacked by defensive tackle Josh Tupou in what I describe as the most medically concerning tackle that I've ever seen. Tupou had waited 5 years and 44 NFL games before recording this first career sack, but all of this was overshadowed by the impact that caused Tua's head to violently bounce off the turf and his fingers to seize up in this weird zombie-like formation.
With the grain, and down he goes, slung down at his own 48-yard line. Josh Tupou.
Contacting the NFL is expected, given the nature of how the game works, but there's a rather disturbing set of immediate medical issues and long-term neurological consequences that comes with these repeated head injuries, which makes these moments even more serious than what's in front of us. And with the laundry list of medical concerns that already surround Tua at this point in his career,
somebody need to be fired. Now, I don't know who, but somebody got to go.
many people have repeatedly stated that he should retire from the NFL to preserve the health of his body and to prevent any further injury to his brain. And many have taken it upon themselves to really criticize the organization for even allowing him to play in the first place.
This is just incredibly devastating. Tua, I hope that your health is okay, and I am very incredibly upset that the NFL has let you down.
So, given his already extensive injury history and probable chance that he's already accumulated some permanent long-term trauma to the brain, should Tua retire from football? When Tua went down during that Bengals-Dolphins game, he suffered a concussion, which is a medical term describing a minor traumatic brain injury that affects and impairs normal brain function. A lot of the symptoms that follow the initial contact of this injury are ones that you'd expect, but the one that everyone's talking about and the one that's the most visibly shocking is the unusual seizing and bending of Tua's fingers in both hands. This is what's medically known as a fencing posture or a fencing response, which is an involuntary physical position caused by injuries like concussions. This type of posturing resembles a fencing stance by the way the arms are positioned, hence the appropriate name, and usually points to a sudden change in our brain's mechanics. Things like vascular permeability, sodium-potassium concentrations, and nerve cell health are all suddenly being disrupted as he's violently crashing his head into the ground. And there's more. Just a week prior to this incident, during a Week 3 clash against the Buffalo Bills, Tua was forced to leave the game after enduring a hit that left him visibly unsteady as he attempted to return to a huddle. Despite this clear display of a head injury, he later re-entered the game, with the Dolphins attributing his instability to a back injury, with the NFLPA voicing serious concerns, suggesting that Miami may have violated concussion protocols in their management of the situation. And there's even more. This year, again versus the Buffalo Bills, Tua attempted to run into the end zone during the third quarter of the game and promptly connected his head into Damar Hamlin's chest, which caused him to crumple onto the floor and receive yet another concussion diagnosis. And this leads to where the major concern for me lies. While Tua's injury history and tendency to repeatedly accumulate trauma to the brain is definitely concerning in the present time, it's arguable that it'll be even more of a concern once he reaches the latter half of his life, when the possible consequences of these repeated hits to the head reveal themselves long after he decides to call it a career and has forgotten all about football. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or better known as CTE, is classified as a neurodegenerative tauopathy, given the presence of these tau proteins that build up as the disease becomes more and more severe. Examinations of deceased NFL players' brains really showcases the severity of this disease, as you can clearly see the pathological differences that result from consistent trauma to the brain in the coloration and shape of these regions.
That is a very large fourth ventricle, and also he's lost a lot of pigment laterally. It's starting to look like an impaired brain.
A UCLA study done back in 2012 looked at the brain scans of 5 retired NFL players who had sustained at least one concussion throughout their playing careers. The PET scan data that the team was collecting was done with the use of a chemical tracer called FDDNP, which indicates the elevated level of tau tangle signals in the brain. By looking at the PET scan data that measures the tau tangles in the players' brains to see where the signals light up, the results are appropriately disturbing. Although the 5 players who were analyzed represented a range of playing positions and medical conditions, all of them had significantly higher FDDNP signals when compared side by side with a control scan. FDDNP binding values were also appearing consistently at a much more elevated level in all of the testing regions of the brain as well, indicating that regardless of where you looked, elevated concentrations of the tau proteins were always present. An examination of the plot showing FDDNP binding values versus the number of sustained concussions in retired players also suggests an association between a greater number of concussions and higher tau binding in various regions. I mean, just look at these brain scans. If I were to ask you to point out which scans look the worst, simply by the color indicator at the bottom with red being the most medically concerning, it's really easy to see who's healthy and who's suffering from neurological abnormalities. And that brings us to the present. Many signs point to recommendations that he retire from the NFL, and we can certainly understand the reasons on why he wouldn't do this. But without knowing exactly what his situation is, medical or not, who are we to tell him what direction in life to take?